They think solitude is punishment. They think being alone means being weak. They think if you're not surrounded by people constantly networking, always collaborating, then you're missing out. They think isolation is the enemy of success. But they're wrong. They've never understood what real power looks like. They've never experienced what happens when you stop depending on others and start depending on yourself. They've never felt the surge of strength that comes when you realize you don't need their validation, their approval, their presence to become everything you're meant to be. Solitude isn't your weakness, it's your weapon, and it's time you learned how to use it. Let them think you're antisocial. Let them think you become too good for their circles. Let them wonder why you stop showing up to their gatherings, their meetings, their endless conversations about nothing. Let them create stories about what happened to you, why you disappeared, why you went quiet. Because while they're wondering, you're working. While they're talking, you're transforming. While they're seeking comfort in crowds, you're finding power in solitude. While they need others to feel complete, you're becoming complete on your own. The world has programmed you to fear being alone. From the moment you're born, you're told that connection is everything, that teamwork makes the dream work, that you need people to succeed, that isolation leads to depression, to weakness, to failure. But that's the lie they need you to believe. Because when you learn to be alone, really alone, when you learn to thrive in solitude instead of just surviving it, you become dangerous, not to others, but to the system that profits from your dependence. Not to people, but to the limitations they've placed on what's possible when someone stops needing external validation. Look at the greatest achievements in history. Look at the moments that changed everything. They didn't happen in boardrooms filled with committees. They didn't happen at networking events with dozens of people giving their opinions. They happened in solitude, in quiet rooms where one person, alone with their thoughts, alone with their vision, alone with their obsession, created something the world had never seen. Einstein didn't discover relativity in a group chat. He discovered it in the silence of his own mind. Tesla didn't revolutionize electricity through collaboration. He did it in the solitude of his laboratory, working while others slept, thinking while others talked. Every breakthrough, every innovation, every leap forward in human progress started with someone willing to be alone with an impossible idea. That's what solitude gives you. Not loneliness, power, not isolation, clarity, not disconnection. The deepest connection possible. The connection to your own potential. But most people can't handle it. They can't sit with themselves for more than a few minutes without reaching for their phone, without calling someone, without finding some way to fill the silence. They're addicted to noise, because noise drowns out the voice inside them that knows they're capable of more. They fear the silence because the silence tells the truth. It tells them they've been making excuses. It tells them they've been depending on others to do what they should be doing themselves. It tells them they've been weak when they could have been strong. You're not most people, or you're about to stop being most people, because you're learning the secret they'll never understand. Solitude isn't the absence of company. It's the presence of possibility. It's not about being alone. It's about being alone with purpose. When you're alone, really alone, without distractions, without opinions, without the noise of other people's fears and limitations, something happens. You start hearing your own voice, not the voice that's been conditioned by society, by family, by friends, the voice that knows exactly what you're capable of, the voice that's been waiting for silence to finally speak. That voice doesn't need encouragement. It doesn't need validation. It doesn't need permission. It just needs space. It needs solitude. It needs you to stop filling every moment with other people's energy so it can finally show you what your energy can create. But here's what they don't tell you about solitude. It's not comfortable. Not at first. When you first start spending real time alone, really alone, your mind will fight it. It will create urgency where there is none. It will manufacture problems that need other people to solve. It will convince you that you're missing out, that you're being antisocial, that something must be wrong with you. That's not weakness talking. That's conditioning. That's years of being told that your value comes from others, that your worth is determined by how many people want to be around you, that success means being busy with other people's agendas. But when you push through that discomfort, when you refuse to fill the silence, when you learn to sit with the thoughts and feelings that arise when you're truly alone, something extraordinary happens. You start becoming who you actually are, instead of who others need you to be. In solitude, you don't have to perform. You don't have to be the version of yourself that makes others comfortable. You don't have to dim your intensity, lower your standards, or compromise your vision to fit in with the crowd. You can be raw, honest, ambitious, obsessed. You can think thoughts that would make others uncomfortable. You can dream dreams that would make others laugh. That's where your weapon is forged. In the space between who they think you are and who you know you can become. In the silence where your real thoughts live. In the solitude where your authentic power grows. Let them think you're hiding. You're not hiding. You're preparing. Let them think you're retreating. You're not retreating. You're advancing on a different battlefield. Let them think you're giving up on people. You're not giving up on people. You're giving up on needing people to believe in you before you believe in yourself. The greatest warriors in history understood this. They didn't train in public. They trained in solitude. They didn't develop their skills in front of crowds. They developed them alone, in the dark. When no one was watching, when no one was cheering, when the only witness to their effort was their own reflection. The samurai didn't become deadly in group classes. They became deadly through solo practice, through meditation, through hours of solitary training that built not just their technique, but their character. The Navy SEALs don't become elite through team-building exercises. They become elite through individual suffering, through personal battles with their own limitations, through solitary moments where they choose to continue when everything inside them wants to quit. That's what solitude teaches you. How to be your own source of strength. How to motivate yourself when no one else is there to motivate you. How to push yourself when no one else is there to push you. How to believe in yourself when no one else is there to believe in you. Most people need external motivation. They need coaches, mentors, accountability partners, support groups. They need others to remind them of their goals, to encourage them when they're struggling, to celebrate their wins. And there's nothing wrong with having those things. But when you need them, when you can't function without them, you're not strong. You're dependent. Real strength comes from being able to operate at your highest level, even when you're completely alone. Real power comes from being your own coach, your own mentor, your own accountability partner, your own support system. Real confidence comes from knowing that no matter what happens to the people around you, you can still achieve everything you've set out to achieve. That's what solitude teaches you. Self-reliance at the deepest level. Not just the ability to be alone, but the ability to thrive alone. Not just surviving without others, but becoming your best self without needing others to make it happen. But this isn't about becoming antisocial. This isn't about cutting people out of your life or believing you don't need anyone ever. This is about developing the internal strength to choose your relationships instead of needing them. This is about being able to add value to others because you're already complete, not seeking others to complete you. When you master solitude, when you become comfortable being alone with your thoughts, your dreams, your fears, your ambitions, you stop being needy. You stop seeking validation. You stop needing others to make you feel worthy, valuable, important. And paradoxically, that makes you more attractive to others, not less. People are drawn to those who don't need them, but choose to be with them. They're repelled by those who need them, but can't function without them. When you develop the ability to be alone, you develop the ability to be selective about who you allow into your space. You stop accepting mediocre relationships because you're afraid of being alone. You start demanding excellence because you know solitude is better than settling. This is how you become dangerous. Not because you're antisocial, but because you're selective. Not because you don't value relationships, but because you value yourself enough to only accept relationships that add to your life instead of drain from it. Not because you don't need people, but because you don't need just any people. The weak surround themselves with anyone willing to be around them. The strong surround themselves only with those worthy of their time. The difference is solitude. The ability to be alone gives you the power to choose your company instead of accepting whatever company you can get. In your solitude, you develop your standards. You figure out what you actually want versus what you've been told you should want. You discover what you're actually capable of versus what others have convinced you is realistic. You uncover what you actually care about versus what you've been conditioned to care about. This is internal revolution. This is the overthrowing of external programming. This is the moment you stop being who they need you to be and start becoming who you're meant to be. And it can only happen in solitude. It can only happen when you stop listening to their voices long enough to hear your own. But they'll resist this. They'll try to pull you back. They'll make you feel guilty for spending time alone. They'll say you're changing, that you're not the same person you used to be, that success is going to your head. They'll create drama to pull you back into their chaos. They'll manufacture emergencies that only you can solve. Don't fall for it. That's not love. That's control. That's their fear of being alone with themselves projected onto you. That's their discomfort with your growth, disguised as concern for your well-being. They don't want you to discover what you're capable of because it reminds them of what they've never attempted. Your solitude threatens their excuses. Your self-reliance challenges their dependence. Your ability to be alone highlights their need to constantly be around others. Your peace and silence exposes their addiction to noise. Your strength in isolation reveals their weakness in crowds. Let them be uncomfortable. Their discomfort is not your responsibility. Their fear is not your problem. Their need for your presence is not your obligation. You don't owe anyone your time, your energy, or your attention just because they want it. You don't have to shrink your solitude to accommodate their insecurity. In solitude, you discover that you're enough. Not because you don't need improvement, but because you don't need others to validate your worth while you're improving. You discover that your own company is not just tolerable, it's valuable. You discover that your own thoughts are not just interesting, they're powerful. You discover that your own dreams are not just valid, they're inevitable. This is when you become truly dangerous. When you realize that everything you need to succeed already exists within you. When you understand that all the motivation, inspiration, and encouragement you've been seeking from others was always available from yourself. When you recognize that the person you've been waiting to meet, the mentor you've been seeking, the leader you've been following, is you. That's the weapon they never saw coming. Not anger, not aggression, not hostility. Self-sufficiency. The ability to generate your own energy. There's the capacity to create your own opportunities instead of waiting for others to give them to you. The power to validate your own worth instead of seeking validation from a world that doesn't understand your value. In your solitude, you'll have conversations with yourself that change everything. You'll ask yourself questions you've never asked. You'll discover answers you've never found. You'll make decisions you've never made. You'll set standards you've never set. You'll develop strength you've never had. You'll realize that most of your problems weren't actually problems. They were distractions. Most of your fears weren't actually dangerous. They were excuses. Most of your limitations weren't actually real. They were stories you told yourself because you listened to other people's stories about what was possible. But in solitude, you write your own story. You set your own limits. You define your own possibilities. You become the author of your own life instead of a character in someone else's narrative. This is liberation. This is freedom. This is power. Not power over others, but power over yourself. Not the ability to control others, but the ability to control your own thoughts, emotions, actions, and destiny. Not dominance over people, but dominance over the circumstances that used to control you. When you master solitude, you master yourself. When you master yourself, you master your life. When you master your life, you become unstoppable. Not because nothing can hurt you, but because nothing can control you. Not because you have no weaknesses, but because your strengths are self-generated. Not because you need no one, but because you choose everyone. They'll start to notice the change. They'll see it in your posture, your confidence, your presence. They'll feel it in your energy, your focus, your certainty. They'll sense it in your words, your decisions, your actions. You'll become someone they don't recognize, but can't ignore. You won't be louder, but you'll be more powerful. You won't be more aggressive, but you'll be more decisive. You won't be more social, but you'll be more magnetic. Because when someone is complete in themselves, when they've learned to be alone without being lonely, when they've turned solitude into strength, they carry a presence that others can feel but can't explain. That's your weapon. Not isolation, but the ability to be alone. Not antisocial behavior, but selective socializing. Not needing no one, but needing no one's permission to become who you're meant to be. So embrace the solitude. Stop running from it. Stop filling it with noise, with distractions, with other people's energy. Sit with it. Learn from it. Let it teach you who you are when no one else is watching. Let it show you what you're capable of when no one else is helping. In that space, in that silence, in that solitude, you'll discover the most powerful person you've ever met. Yourself. Not the version of yourself that performs for others, but the version that exists when all the performances stop. Not the version that seeks approval, but the version that gives approval to itself. That person, that version of you that emerges in solitude, that's your secret weapon. That's your competitive advantage. That's your source of unshakable strength. Because when you can be alone without being lonely, when you can work without needing encouragement, when you can dream without needing validation, you become someone the world has never seen before. You become someone who doesn't need the world to change for them to succeed. You become someone who changes the world. by changing themselves. You become someone who doesn't wait for permission, for opportunity, for perfect conditions. You become someone who creates permission, generates opportunity, and thrives in any conditions. That's what happens when solitude becomes your weapon. You don't just survive alone. You dominate alone. You don't just cope with isolation. You weaponize it. You don't just endure silence. You transform it into power. So stop fearing the quiet. Stop running from the empty spaces. Stop filling every moment with other people's voices. Your voice is in there, waiting. Your power is in there, growing. Your weapon is in there, sharpening. All you have to do is be brave enough to be alone with it. All you have to do is be strong enough to face yourself without anyone else's approval. All you have to do is be disciplined enough to spend time with the most important person in your life, you. Do it alone. Not because you have to, because you can. Because when you can do it alone, you can do it anywhere. Because when you can succeed in solitude, you can succeed in any situation. Because when solitude becomes your weapon, nothing can disarm you. The world is waiting to see what you become when you stop depending on it and start depending on yourself. Show them. Show yourself. Show everyone what happens when someone learns to be alone without being weak, isolated without being helpless, solitary without being small. Show them what happens when solitude becomes your weapon.